Good afternoon. It's just after 1, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Julie Fenlon. I'm the Historic Site Supervisor here at Historic Walnford, and I want to welcome you all to coming to this program today. We have Carlton Crispin in the back here. He's with South Jersey Quakers, and he will be recording this lecture for educational purposes, just so you guys are aware. And then, finally, we have Sue Kozel, a local historian who is providing graciously this talk for us, and I'm so looking forward to hearing what she has to say.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to quick dart across.
All right, dart across. Thank you, thank you. All right, everybody. I'm going to sit because I'm having hip surgery in about 3 weeks. So forgive me. Normally I would be standing next to it, but I can't do that today. So I'm sorry for the people behind me. But welcome. Welcome, everybody. The sun's out, the mud's out, the snow's going. It's a good day in Upper Freehold. And I'll wait till everybody's ready. So my name is Sue Kozel, and I'm so excited to be with you because the research I'm going to share has been grant funded by several agencies. I'll talk about that in a second. But on the very top page, you'll see Negro Gilbert. I don't like to use the word Negro, so I only use it when it's on a historical document, and then I'll start to say free black during the course of the talk. And he is the only black man in Richard Waln, a Quaker merchant's payroll that's signed for his funds. So this is so unusual. Gilbert Wooby, and we'll meet him through records. Walnford does not talk a lot about black history. I do think that's a mistake. I think that Walnford should be on the New Jersey Black Heritage Trail that's being done by the New Jersey Historical Commission. And I think there's an extraordinary story to hear, but I leave it to you. You may think it's nothing, but I've dedicated about 20 years to researching and writing on this. So let's go. Let's go to the next page. All right, let's see if my fingers are going to do the walking. So I can't name everybody, and no, John Fabiano, I didn't put you up here, but I'm going to acknowledge you. No, I adore you, but I just can't put everybody down here. But I listed the people mostly on an academic side that have gotten me grants and worked with me, helped me get published on this story. And then I listed my poor husband, Chris Brzezinski. So thank you, Chris. Thank you to Monmouth County Parks, especially Andrew J. Spears and Julie Fenlon, who we met. And thank you, Tabby, the Allentown Village Initiative, for co-sponsoring today's, and I had his event, history event. Tabby is so important because we have such a rich history, and John Fabiano has worked with them, and I've worked with them. And without Tabby, I don't think we'd have a great grounding in Revolutionary War history and local history. So thank you, Tabby. And we have Al DeFalco, who's here, with Annette, his wife, from Tabby. So thank you, Tabby. Thank you to everybody I've met, and in particular to the New Jersey Historical Commission, New Jersey Council of Humanities for grants. And I also want to thank Thomas Jefferson's Monticello for a fellowship where I lived bizarrely in an overseer's house for a month and studied Quakers and enslavement. So thank you. That's another story for another day. So I just want to give you some background because I often meet people who look at me, and I guess I don't look like a historian for whatever that means, so I'm always on a little the defensive. I feel I have to show my creds. So I've spoken in Europe, nationally all over the United States, regionally in New Jersey academic conferences, and some of you may know some of the work I did on the murder of Wench Betty, an enslaved woman killed by her owner in Upper Freehold, who was a veteran of the American Revolution. It's a horrific story, and why it's key is that the slave-owning members of the coroner team voted that Arthur Barkalow committed murder and asked that it go for a grand jury hearing. So that is an unusual case, and it's in this area, Upper Freehold. I've also followed Barkalow enslaved to Kentucky and Ohio on a grant, trying to figure out how were the Barkalow enslaved in New Jersey still enslaved when Ohio was a free state. So It's a very complicated world and it's not always fair, right? So I'm going to be straight up. With John Fabiano, I keep mentioning John. John's my partner. I presented a 14-page report with 5 exhibits as an expert witness to opposed warehouses in Upper Freehold on Revolutionary War land. So, yeah, we're very proud of that. And so my research really focused on what George Washington said. So, in case anybody's interested, I'm going to pass this around, but please don't keep it, all right? It's my co-edited book, and there's a chapter on Richard Waln. I'll start with John to pass it around. Yeah, I presented, I published, and that's that. All done. Enough of me. Okay, let's go. And that's a recent article on the right in the American Historical Association's journal, which they interviewed me as being what's it like to be an expert witness at a planning board hearing. Something I never thought I'd do. I don't think, John, you ever thought you'd do that too, right? Right. It shows we always learn new things. So because it's about Black history, I wanted to first give you a little background on Black history in the area, just in case, especially Revolutionary period enslavement. And then I want to go to Richard Waln, because his talk is about African Americans who worked with Richard Waln. This isn't a talk about Richard Waln, per se. I hope you're not offended, but I'd like to do that, if that's all right with you. So, Upper Freehold, we're right on the border of Burlington County, right on the border of what would have been East and West Jersey, Burlington County, West Jersey. So we're a very interesting place. We had a number of Quakers in Upper Freehold. Some worshipped, like the Robbins family in Upper Freehold. Others, like Richard Waln, when he came from Philadelphia, worshipped in Chesterfield. And the meeting house then was called the Chesterfield Society of Friends meeting. If we look at the federal census, there are 250 slaves, and then 100 free men and 108 free men and free women. And those would be Black people. So you'll start to see that I don't like to use slaves as a word either. I try to use enslavement. I try to use enslaved. And sometimes I'm stuck with the language of the census. So again, I try to be sensitive. Free Black men owned land in the late Revolutionary period. I'm going to show you some of those stats here, which again, were a little unusual, and we feel more like parts of West Jersey, which is more heavily Quaker in the time, than we do East Jersey. And when I moved here, everybody wanted to talk about the Underground Railroad. Well, thankfully it existed, right, in this area. Nobody wanted to talk about enslavement. And I thought that was a mistake. You cannot know the history without knowing our region's slavery. So imagine how many friends I made with that, with that view. Not many. So we're going to try to understand where we are. We're in a historic Walnford, a county park. Julie was gracious enough to bring up brochures. If you haven't gotten a brochure, please get one from her. It's a beautiful park, and we're grateful to Monmouth County. It's on the Upper Freehold Historic Farmland Byway. And I was vice chair of that, and John Fabiano was on that committee too. And representing Allentown. And it's important that we have a partnership between Allentown and Upper Freehold, because Allentown was part of Upper Freehold until the late 19th century. All right, onward. So, slaves in U of T on tax rolls. Now, I'm going to go through the numbers and I'm going to explain a caveat. So, we're looking at 1780, the number was 24 men and boys. It didn't say men and boys. It didn't have names. And I'm going to show you some of those images from the record so you can see for yourself. 1784, there's a census required by the federal government of all slaves to be counted in every state. So New Jersey, there were 2 columns, 55, which is men and boys, even though it doesn't say that. And then I went through and counted all the enslaved people listed in another column, and it's 294. And I still think that number's low for this area. 1789, 42, 1792, 45, 1808, 25. So by slaves, in New Jersey, in the federal census, we'll do it a little differently. It's looking at young boys and men between 16 and 55 in years. Sometimes New Jersey taxed up to 60. If you are ill, if you are disabled, you're not counted in that. You would be, even though you're a man, and between 16 and 55, you would be in this big category of slaves, which includes women, girl children, young people who are physically impaired. And there's an excellent publication by Paul Axel Lute that is a bibliography of New Jersey slave law. He's the guy who put this all together for Rutgers Law School. So a snapshot of U of T enslavement 1784, we have 583 taxpayers. I know I've got some statistics, people. And don't worry, you have it all in the packets. I printed at my own expense. Yeah, because you're welcome, because it's just too much to take in, right? Yeah. So you can take notes on the packet if you want. Know that you will be able to take this home, think about it more. Free black men. So there were 6 free black men listed. They'll be listed as Negroes on the tax roll. And sometimes with, sometimes without a surname, a last name. Taxpayers who owned human beings, 107 of the taxpayers were slave owners. That's about 18.5%. 96 were white men who owned 268 enslaved, 6 white women who owned 12 enslaved people, 5 free African American men who owned 14 enslaved. Wow. Now, I would ask you if you could do me a kindness. If you have questions, write them down, and when we get to the end, bring them on, because I'm afraid, I know there are going to be questions even right now. It will just, I've given probably close to 200, I was saying 150, more like 200 presentations, and it just never works, okay? I can't explain it. But anyhow, usually the African American men who owned enslaved people, they purchased their families. They purchased a relative. And you'll find the number disappears in 1 or 2 later tax rolls. And the great Carter Woodson, who created Negro History Month, now Black History Month, he wrote an amazing treatise on this, where an African-American scholar, I want to say Harvard, just wrote brilliantly about how African-American men who owned slaves for the most part were buying family. There's another group of mixed race enslaved men and women who owned slaves deep south. But if we're looking at our region, so I know that probably raised a little question like, oh, what's that about? So now I can tell you a little bit about Richard Waln. Sometimes it says he died in 1808. I'm staying with 1809. That's the year. I'm sticking to it. So he is a successful Quaker entrepreneur at 25 who's running a major business in Philadelphia and owned a shipping business and traded with Barbados. Do I hear slavery? Absolutely. So we're talking about the 1860s going into the 70s, and I'll talk a little bit about the Quaker manumission efforts. But he's coming out of that. He's a signer in corporation papers of the Pennsylvania Abolition Society. And you'll hear me mention the Pennsylvania Abolition Society a lot today because they were actually involved in various efforts in New Jersey to liberate slaves. He was on the Constitution Committee of the Abolition Society. He was a slave owner in New Jersey here and in Pennsylvania. And he also manumitted slaves. You know, Benjamin Franklin did the same thing. So we're looking at somebody's, that's where you free your slaves. You write a certificate that frees. Thank you for that question. Quakers were the leaders, along with some Methodists, in manumitting freeing slaves, and then the issue was how soon would freedom come? Sometimes it would take 10, 15 years. Okay. He expands his business and moves to New Jersey, Walnford, and we're looking at 1772, 1773 records say he's here. He sells his wife's slave. So while he's in his 20s, his wife inherited a slave. He sells that slave and enters it into his letter book. I'll show you that. And then he hires Negroes. Now, sometimes he will hire an enslaved person to work off the debt of his or her owner. And then Richard will require in Philadelphia that once that debt's paid, the slave owner, sometimes the captain of a ship, will free that woman usually who's working off his debt. It's complicated, right? And he gives financial credit to African Americans. So when we look at some of the tax records, we're going to see that there is a record that African Americans who worked for him, free blacks, carried debt when they bought soap, when they bought wheat, when they fulled wool of their own clothes. So yes, it's important to know that. I just wanted to, as we're thinking about Waln, remember that the free black community, which has either been born into freedom, some of these individuals by having a free mother, or have been freed through manumission, it's growing too. And this is on tax records. This does not include women, does not include the numbers of children. There are wonderful records for Gloucester County of manumissions that will include those numbers, but I don't have access to that with our case. And for anybody who says this is easy to do, I want you to sit next to me, spare 6 hours a day, and look at a screen and manually read handwritten entries and count numbers. Because this is not something people want to do. But unless we do the hidden history, we won't know the numbers, because no one talks about the numbers. Look at the acreage owned by free blacks in Upper Freehold. That is something that's always, and it continues, I think, to baffle me a little. I can't say it's only because of the manumissions. There's something else going on between black and white farmers, and I know some have written about Samuel Foreman as being a white farmer who worked with a number of black farmers. It turns out some of the men we'll discuss today worked with Richard Waln, and they were farmers. So, all right, let's go on. As much as... That's all men? That's only men? Yes, that's only men. Yes, yes. And what we're going to try to do is write down your question, I've already broken my rule on answer 2, but I'd like to just... because I see where it's going. We have like a super inquisitive, exciting group, right? We're ready to go. But I'll never get through this. Okay, so forgive me for being my human self. Okay, I can't help myself. Early Richard Waln history in Philadelphia. Let's look at some of it. So he's trying to leave Philadelphia, and he's coming out to New Jersey to figure out, hey, I think I can make money. I sense that there's a war coming, and I want to relocate. So that little X marks the spot is where I think the Waln property would be today, where we are. And this is a Sir William Alexander map from the 1750s, Rutgers Special Collections. And what is wild about this map, I don't know if I have any equestrians here, but it's designed to keep turning around as you're on your horse. Is that wild? Is that wild? Because here's some... Okay. Here's some upside down writing, right? Sure. You're like, giddy up, oops, giddy up. And then like, oh, I fell off the horse. Oh, well. But here's one of the Quaker meetings that's in, yes, probably Robbins. And then there was Arniestown, of course, Quaker meeting. That would be a little bit more over here. There's Wright's Quaker meeting, also a little bit over here. And there's the Yellow Meeting House. If I have any Baptists in the house, one of the oldest meeting house for the Baptist community. So this gives you a sense that what's the biggest thing on here? Doctors Creek. It provides a way to move. People move goods to Bordentown and Philly. All right, back to our story. Oops, where's my mouse? Okay, here we go. So when Richard is a young man in Philadelphia, he actually read John Woolman's 1754 book, Considerations on Keeping Negroes. And that was a monumental moment in the Quaker religion, also in the United States history of abolition, where John Woolman considered a very simplistic in terms of dress, very smart man, only wore clothes after he wrote this book that he made himself, would not use dye that was produced by slaves, would not use cotton, use hemp. So John Woolman has cracked open this weighty Quaker world of wealth and written a book saying, you are sinning when you own an enslaved human being. Waln read that, and it's in his notes, and he sent it to another person in Barbados in the 1760s. So Waln is aware and proof of these issues. I don't know if he met John Woolman. I don't know if he met Uriah more than once or twice. Uriah purchased goods from Richard Waln. That's John's brother. Very wealthy, Uriah Woolman. And Uriah would pay black men's debt when they couldn't pay for lemons. Richard Waln sold a lot of lemons. Well, Uriah paid that debt. So it's very interesting. Again, this idea of, well, I'm not going to necessarily work at this point to free the enslaved people that are working with me or working with others, but another Quaker will come in and pay that cost. Woolman does the same thing, John, his brother. So there is a connection right there. All right, onward. I'm so sorry for my bad camera work. This is the best I can do. But Richard Waln's wife, Elizabeth Armitt, inherits an enslaved person. Richard's like, no, I don't want a slave. Well, he recorded the sale of that slave to George Wood, and he put it in his ledger. So Richard makes the profit off the sale of the enslaved person. That struck me as very strange, because this is all as Richard's getting, caught up. And one thing I can say about Quakers, they're extraordinary documenters of facts and ledgers in particular. So this was shocking to me to find that there, and that he recorded as a profit. And again, it's a little blurry, I'm sorry. Received a George Wood in cash and bond for a Negro wench, left my wife. And that was 64 pounds is what he sold her for. Now, Wood didn't pay on time, so Waln hit him for interest too. But this is again life. African Americans are not equals. And Quakers had their own problems too, but Quakers also stepped up in ways that many British subjects did not do. All right, so that's part of Richard's thing. And keeping the considerations of keeping of Negroes, this was a reproduced version in the 19th century, and copying the front. And you'll see again, it was first printed in 1754. This is archive.org. So where I can, I've tried to squeeze in all the sources. I don't put all the sources in detail because I've learned, I'm going to be 68 this year, I've learned that sometimes people in our field are not necessarily kind and they'll just lift work you do. So I put where they come from, but I don't give a lot of times the exact page and reference. So this is the record of Richard joining the Chesterfield Society of Friends meeting. And this is 1774. He's now living in Walnford. And I just wanted to show that, he would have gotten a certificate from Philadelphia so that he can join this meeting, and he was accepted. He's coming from the Northern District of Philadelphia, and they gave them a certificate to transfer in, for lack of a better word. I know I have Quakers in the room, so feel free, if you are moved by the Spirit, in questions or comments, just to maybe talk on your own research and your own thoughts on this. To me, I think this is a beautiful Quaker phrase, the spirit of benevolence. And Richard Waln was writing a Quaker. Isaac Collins, some of you probably know, he printed for the federal government many of their newsletters. He was very prominent in Bordentown. And Collins thought at one point Richard Waln was too hot to handle, that he's going to lose business. And these are real world considerations at that time. And Collins told him he's not going to help Richard anymore, help African Americans seeking freedom through manumission. And this, again, shows some of the tensions among good people in communities who are struggling in their minds with, how do I make a living? And this is the language. And I highlighted the one I wanted to really have us focus on. I'm going to start with "let us" in blue, and then I'm going to go to the red. Good God, I have to learn how to do this. Okay. Let us then, by our example, endeavor to spread many of the sons of men such a spirit of benevolence, as every father of family would wish to see amongst his children. So will the common parent of mankind smile on our labors and reward us with the most delightful feelings of the human heart. I would say this is a very tender-hearted Quaker phrase. To me, it's beautiful. But part of what we do, even in our own lives, because I know I'm not a perfect person, as has been pointed out to me many times, that how do we balance our own wants, let's say. So as Richard's coming into Walnford, he will be pulled into something called freedom suits. And these are writs of habeas corpus, where a lawyer, and again you have information on this in your packets, where the lawyer will represent before the Supreme Court, in this case for the Pennsylvania Abolition Society, and say that Negro Silas has the right to own himself, and he is not enslaved because his mother was free, and therefore the owner of his mother, or the usually relative of a deceased man, cannot hold back freedom for Negro Silas. I mean, these are very powerful court cases between 1790 and about 1799. And Richard was involved in 3 that resulted in freedom. And what he would do is he would go and he'd get on his horse and go and hear the case, usually heard by 2 Supreme Court justices. And he would share information from the Pennsylvania Abolition Society with the judge. I'm unclear if he actually spoke or gave it to him in an envelope. I'm not sure what was going on, truthfully. And the Pennsylvania Abolition Society would get a visit from Richard, who'd get on a boat, go to Philly, and then, I guess, take a carriage or walk, and he'd give them all the information. It's recorded in the Pennsylvania Abolition Society minutes. So it's like a lot of paperwork going on with manumissions. One issue maybe we want to think about is how successful are manumissions, because they're relatively small in number as compared to when people run away, self-emancipation, right? You run, and hopefully you're not caught. But that might be a question for us when this is over. Yes, again, I'm sorry. This is Richard's letter book. Every letter he sent, he kept a copy, like Thomas Jefferson. But he didn't have Jefferson's magic machine. He actually rewrote everything by hand, so he had a record. So he wrote to the Friends in 1788 while he's in here in Walnford, and he's writing about a natural right to liberty. And he's ashamed, he says, that a particular member has a woman, he says a Negro woman, that he's set free, but the child is still enslaved. This ended up being an explosive issue, and this did end up as a court case. And what he says is, I would like with you to consider what you ought to do to remedy that most seditious act of injustice, the depriving of his natural right of liberty, the aforesaid cuff. He's taking the Scottish Enlightenment language that drove the American Revolution, right? We have a natural right to liberty. They don't say freedom, they say liberty. And he's saying Cuff has that. And now Cuff's been denied it, and he's 24 years old, and he's a man, a good-looking young man who has character of being honest. And he's saying to John Gout of the Friends of Egg Harbor Monthly Meeting, what are you doing? He would never say that as crudely as I did, like, what are you doing? He would mask it in this beautiful, long language, message God, right? He's telling them, I'm coming for you. That's his way to do it, because Richard was involved also in this case, gathering information. Now you're sitting in his home, this is not a simple Quaker. This is one of the wealthiest Quakers in New Jersey. And so we're going to, things to think about is we have ideas that Quakers are simplistic, they live simply. Not Richard, he's a merchant, he lives really well. And he has all these worlds. He's a multi-hydra-headed world he lives in. So how are we looking at Waln in terms of his being a slave owner? And who were the free blacks who worked for him? So Quaker merchant Richard Waln owned two enslaved people in 1781, one slave in 1784, one servant, and he's the only person in Upper Freehold who had the servant category, in 1779, and two servants in 1780. And this is from tax rolls. Now we know Elizabeth Drinker's famous Quaker diary talks about Waln and his Negro Peter in 1776. There's not, Upper Freehold does not have many of the preserved local tax rolls, so I have no way of looking at that. But up pops free black Peter Waln, and he appears on the Upper Freehold tax rolls in the years I've listed. So we know that Richard owned slaves, and then we know that Richard owns a slave, his wife, who he sold in Philadelphia. And then we know there's a black man who has the name Peter Waln. So I first asked, could this be his child? That was my first thought. I don't know. I have to ask all the questions, right, to try to get at the answer. I think I know who he is. And after we look at the tax rolls, and when we get to Peter in a little bit, I'm going to show you how I think we figured out who Peter Waln is. But in the North, in New Jersey, many enslaved blacks will keep their owner's name. And in tax records, you'll still see something like Anderson with apostrophe S, Anderson's Tom. So you won't always see a surname for free blacks. Sometimes you'll see the surname assigned from the former owner, and sometimes you'll just see a first name. That's the reality. Okay, let's go. All right, I'm sorry, we all have to have an eye test, but anyhow, especially me, slaves. This is a tax record. Okay, so that's why I wear trifocals. All right, so 2, Richard Waln, 169 acres. So I don't know who one of the other enslaved people was. I think one is Peter, who became free black Peter Waln. But yeah, so there it is. And I think it would be wonderful for the park to talk about transformations, how a slave owner goes to a manumitter, goes to hiring and working with free blacks. That's the story. We can't just say he's an abolitionist. It's much more complicated than that. This is the wallpaper from Richard's home, thanks to Monmouth County Parks Archives. I mean, he had gold gilt painted on the wallpaper. This dude is very, very wealthy. And again, we all have stereotypes. I find I do it too, of what I think a group is or isn't. And so he didn't reconcile living a simple life as a Quaker. He's part of the weighty Quaker class of wealth, the Biddles, the Pembertons. Morris always had slaves in the early years, so there's a split among some of them, but he's part of that Quaker wealth. We already talked about how he moved his family to worship in Burlington County. Now, he's seen as a local loyalist. He's removed to New York. It appears his family and business remain unharmed. I mean, the business is going on while he is in Staten Island. He's called a very dangerous man by Governor Livingston. Well, he wrote Governor Livingston on August 13, 1788, that he would like to take a loyalty test. So he's now a loyal American, right? He did not stay On the dark side, I guess one would say. But he took a stand to support the revolution, which is a no-no among the Quakers. And we have splits between the Quakers with the fighting Quakers who support the revolution, right? And then the rest who were persecuted, some sent to Virginia in isolation. Okay, so some murdered. Oh my God, murder's here, John, right? A lot of killing going on in this area, Upper Freehold. This is the letter. So I think that we don't really tell the full story either about Waln, how he transitions and becomes an American, a supporter of the revolution. That's left out, and I think that's also a mistake. Right? The more complicated, the more truthful. So Richard Waln takes on several slave owners, including in Upper Freehold, the Holmes family in particular. Someone from the Holmes family hung on Richard's barn out here a sign that said, "Negroes for sale, cattle for sale, come buy this for sale." And Richard lost his mind and wrote a letter to a man who was overseeing his property at that point saying, "I'm bringing this to your attention. You may not know this. This needs to be taken down immediately and it will never happen again." So he has problems with the Holmes. However, the Holmes come buy goodies from him. He sells iron pots, he sells ovens, he sells dishes, soap, sundries, doilies, clothes, wool, wheat. So a lot of the slave owners in Upper Freehold buy from Richard, and Richard does not tell them, "I'm not going to have you purchase my goods." Again, this is one human being, and these are the choices he made. At the same time, he's fighting with many neighbors, including the Lawrence family, which is another large slave-owning family in Upper Freehold. He has a dispute with Jacob Hendrickson over slave Nell, and this went to the Supreme Court, and Nell was freed. So he's burning bridges. If he wants to take slave owners' money for goods, he's burning that bridge when he's gone right to the court, and he's going to be a critical fact finder for the court to free enslaved people. He advocates for Negro Silas, a falsely enslaved young black man, and he also fights for Betty, who is another woman in another lawsuit. I'm sorry, I just can't go into every case in detail, and I apologize for that. He finally got a slave owner to actually free his slave in 1784, and Richard Waln was the executor for his will. So he does some of this as he's in Walnford. He's more and more kind of trying to convert, a dangerous word, convert people to the value of the human heart, as he said in that beautiful letter he wrote. And then Peter Waln, as I mentioned earlier, who I believe starts as enslaved, he works for Richard as a free black. So let's look at, there's probably up to 20 African Americans. I didn't list them all because, for example, there's a man named Chalky White. Now, there are chalky whites who are white, there are chalky whites who are black, there are probably mixed race chalky whites. I don't know what this chalky white was, and he wasn't, Richard has a common thread. He lists all black people as Negro in his piece. So there are at least another 14, 16 people I'm still checking on, but this is a core group of African Americans at Walnford. Gilbert Wooby, who spelled several ways. Al knows the Tabby Times did a story about Gilbert Wooby to lead up to our talk today. And Gilbert signed his name, Gilbertwbe. But on tax records, he's listed as Negro Gilbert or Gilbert Wooby. Negro Peter, who's also listed as a free black Peter Waln. There's typos live. Like typos are everywhere. So Peter Wall becomes Peter Wall or becomes Peter Walls. It's the same person, it's just spelled differently. Negro Silas. Now, Negro Silas might be the same person who was freed under a freedom suit by Waln before the Supreme Court in 1790. I don't know that for sure, but I'm keeping that in the back of my head. It's something to look at. Then there's several other African Americans. Betty is the only African American who's not listed with Negro. And she was sheltered on the property. Actually, Richard, according to records, had a runaway black woman and her children, 2 children, sheltered on the property. Historical Society of Pennsylvania said he was a slave owner holding them against their will. They read the document wrong. I met with them. He was actually harboring them so that they would not be kidnapped by the slave owner. So lots going on, right? I mentioned the Holmes family putting the sign on the piece there, so I'm just going to skip this just to save a little time. I want to show you Richard signed a petition in 1796 to end slavery in New Jersey. And Minto Lesage is an African American. See where it says by Negroes? It's like, so Richard circled in red by Negroes. And I think it's actually Mingo, because Mingo exists on the Upper Freehold tax records. And I think, again, people, if he could not write his name and spoke it, there were free blacks who could write, like Wooby. There are other free blacks who couldn't. So I'm not sure what's going on, but an African American also signed this petition. Okay, I've got 15 minutes. What I'm going to try to do is, I think I'll be able to get through 2. Where's my mouse? Come on, mouse. I can see it there, but I can't see it here. Okay. So I'm not going to be able to go to Silas. So let's go to Gilbert Wooby. Negro Gilbert works for Richard Waln at Walnford. Richard Waln gives him financial credit. He's one of only 2 African Americans who are sometimes listed with Negro in front of their names and their surnames, or not. So it's kind of like amazing that we have both Gilbert listed as Negro Gilbert, and then we see his surname. That's very unusual for Waln's records. He's the only African American who signed Waln's ledger. And he's a free black who owns 60 or 65 acres in Upper Freehold of land on the tax rolls in the 1790s, as we look at the tax rolls. I wrote this out for you because I knew it would just be so crazy to listen and take notes. That way when you take it home, you can read it again. So I'm just going to highlight some ideas here. We know that Gilbert's on Waln's payroll in 1795, 1801, and 1802. So he's there. We also know Gilbert may have a relative named Darius Wooby. Darius Wooby owns a home on tax records, but it's Gilbert who owns the land. And it's Gilbert who owns some cattle. I'm going to show you the segregated list of black men in Upper Freehold who pay taxes, and it's Negroes. Sometimes it's Negroes' persons' names or Negroes. So in all likelihood, Gilbert was a farmer. He did have cattle. I don't know if he raised the cattle for beef purposes. And he's one of the large property owners among African Americans in this time. Did he trade goods with Waln? I don't know. What I see Waln paying him for is duties he did around Waln's farm here, not for bringing goods from his property. I've not found manumission papers for Gilbert Wooby, and there is no white Wooby in Upper Freehold. So I must tell you, there's a lot of things I don't know. But the fact that he has a surname and uses it and owns property is extraordinarily significant. In 1794, 40 African American men or boys were owned. Enslaved women, young women, female children, and those injured are not counted in those numbers. So we're after the Revolution, where in the early American Republic, slavery is still happening here. And Allentown, of course, is part of Upper Freehold. I mean, I could show you the Imlay names of slaveholders. I could show you the Newells as slave owners. Slaves are owned by people in Allentown and the rest of Upper Freehold. No one's clean. So Gilbert Wooby, Darius Wooby, Peter Waln. This is what the tax record looks like. Do you see Negroes? And persons' names. Look at Adam. Adam doesn't have a surname. So what I've tried to do is create a list where I compare how each person's listed over time. see it was a new name or something. Look at Garrett Potts. Cato Potts, rather. Cato Potts owns 100 acres. I mean, it's huge, right? There's Darius Wooby. He owns 2 cattle. And he's a householder. That's what that means. And here's Gilbert, 60 acres. And the value is £5. And then he owns one horse and 1 cattle. And he doesn't own a home. So it makes me wonder if Darius is the homeowner and Gilbert, Gilbert might be older and he might have a son, that he lives with and gave him the home. Gilbert paid taxes on the land, the poor tax, and more. I haven't been able to find a voting record for Upper Freehold for this time period. I can find them actually for Gloucester. Yeah, they exist for Gloucester County. I can't find them here. So maybe I'm just not looking in the right place. So here's another example. So here's 1794 Darius Wooby. He still owns 2 horses, and 2 cattle and a householder. There's Gilbert, and he owns 1 horse, and he owns 4 cattle, and he owns still the land. And we can see other names. In June, I'm speaking for Juneteenth for Tabby at the Allentown Methodist Church, and I'm going to focus on all the names and make a list of all the names of free black people listed in tax records, so that at least maybe our communities can figure out, is this my relative? Is this somebody else's relative? Oh, I know that name. Is that related to me? Because the people have to answer these questions since the records aren't always accurate. Okay. And all right, so let's move on. I just want you to see, this is where we have to go to find records, where there's no neat narrative. Now this is 1796, and there's Darius again. Look, Darius doesn't have a surname, but I know it's Darius. So, because it's the same numbers, right? 2 and 1. And there's Gilbert, now he's 65 acres. And here's Peter Waln, and he owns 2 cattle, and he's a householder. That means if it's Peter Waln, as I think it is, he's living here on Walnford in a house. Some of the records I looked at from Monmouth County Archives I haven't finished, but it says Peter Waln was paid $10 and lived in a house. So I believe this is correct. Okay, and you saw Gilbert Wooby again. Now I had an argument with the Historical Society of Pennsylvania because they told me blacks don't write at this point, and no. That's Richard Wald's signature. And I said, do you look at all the writing here? There's no way. It's not the same signature. Look at the G. Look at the letters. It's not. Look at Negro Gilbert. Look at Gilbert. It's not even the same writing. So could it be another person who wrote his name for him? Possibly. But I'm going to say that we should at least consider that Gilbert Wooby could write. Because this is the only example of this in the entire ledger for Waln. And so he's being paid with certain accounts here. And then he owed money because he missed work for several months, and Richard had paid him up front. So he had earned £67, and it was deducted £25, so he left with his last payment of £39. Again, Quaker records are remarkable in terms of numbers. All right, let's go. I'm going to try to jump ahead to Peter Waln, and then if I have your permission to go to 205, I'd like to do that with Peter, and then we'll be done. You have all the stuff on Silas, so you can read that at least. So, sorry about this, but this is a facsimile of the record. Negro Peter hired by Richard Waln, so 1790. This is a record for 1790. Okay. We see that he's carrying forward certain costs, that he bought rye meal, Peter, that he paid, he was being held 19 shillings and 6 pence for cloth, 16 pounds, 11 pence 16 pounds, 11 shillings, and 10 pence. They're still writing in the British numbers, right? The British way. And over here is how many days he worked, what he was paid, what he should have been paid, and the wages that were owed to him. So we know he's on the pay roll. And we know there's a free Peter Waln, and this is 1808. And he owns 2 cattle still, and he's a householder. So here it is, and he's paying these taxes. He's not paying the dog tax because he doesn't have a dog. Okay, so, but there was a tax, I should have mentioned earlier, I think I'll hold off on that. Here's Peter Waln. So I'm just looking at records, like, did Peter Waln, exist in terms of tax records? And there he is. Again, 2 cattle and a house. So how did Negro Peter go from enslavement to freedom and become Peter Waln? Well, I'm not sure I can answer all of it, but we have to go back to Philadelphia. And Richard Waln's brother is the clerk of the Philadelphia Yearly Meeting. Nicholas Waln. Nicholas Waln had a mystical experience in the Quaker tradition in 1772 and was recognized as a great orator, an elder for his extreme knowledge and his extreme passion. That might not be the right word, but his commitment to the light, to preserving the light, and to Quaker ways. So this is the manumission book that was done by the Quakers. And down here, Southern District, 161 to 240. That's the number of people that are being freed. That's what that means. Nicholas Waln and Jacob Shoemaker, Peter. And we're going to look at that in a second. Nicholas Waln, Francis Black. That's the name of an African American. So this one is Nicholas Waln, serving as the lead record keeper recording a manumission of Francis Black. But I want to take you to Peter. And this is why we all need an eye test, right? So Jacob Dupree died and left in his will a young Negro boy named Peter. And he wanted to have that young man freed by the time he was 31. And so he died, and he wanted to make sure that he would not be kept in bondage forever. And so Jacob Shoemaker was given Peter, not as a gift. It's a weird thing, not quite as a slave, but still in the manumission process, not quite free. Jacob Shoemaker, who's a very good friend of the Waln family, Jacob Shoemaker says, I don't want the slave. I'm going to hire him out to Nicholas Waln. Nicholas Waln goes, I don't want a slave. I don't want to hire out the slave. So Nicholas Waln issues his own manumission of this young man, Peter. And it's a sequence of documents going, this is all in the same day. It's all moving like, no. And he goes, and he feels that Peter is of the age of 21. And that he doesn't think Peter should wait till he's 31 to be freed. He thinks he was born free. And that language is used here. He was born free and should be freed in 1774. Well, Pennsylvania law won't allow that. At that time, bless you. So that's how I think Peter Waln gets to Richard Waln. Because Richard Waln, according to Quaker Quaker writers, has a black person named Negro Peter in 1776. The manumission was 1744. It's 2 years later. It makes perfect sense to me. So this young Peter now is in Richard's hands, and Richard is promising his brother he will free him at some point. So he's at least 21 years of age, Peter, in 1774. So 18 years later, he's listed as a free black in Upper Freehold. So he's 39 then. I don't know if he was freed before that, because in Richard's notes, everything is Negro Peter. Now, do I have this hard pack proven? No. But I'm thinking as a historian that there are all these facts coming together, And I always put the caveat, this might be the case, but I believe it, because the name Peter Waln pops up in tax records afterwards. We don't have time for Silas. All I can say is this is an amazing case, one of the most important cases in New Jersey freedom suits. And I've given you a number of resources at least to think about with that. We're on slide 50 of 60, but I think we should stop. What do you think? What do you want? I'm good. Are you good? Well, should we take a vote? Do we believe in democracy still? Okay. All in favor of keep going, raise your hands. And I'll do whatever the will of the group says. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, my neck. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay, can our other 7 people hang in for a little bit more? Okay, I'll try to march through this. Okay. So imagine being a child. Your mother's a free black woman. You have been told in a will that you will be free. And then the guy's son or the new owner says, no, you're my property. And that happens all the time, right? It happens all the time in New Jersey, Philadelphia, everywhere, actually. Everywhere that pretended to do many missions. Okay, I want to take that out for a minute. So, Negro Silas is freed by Waln's efforts to challenge a local slave owner in a New Jersey State Supreme Court case. So, this young man who's told no, he can never be free, is freed. Now, in 1790 is the case. And then it takes another 2 years for a reaffirmation of the case to go to the Supreme Court and set a precedent for all manumissions that occur after that. So this is a big deal case. So here comes Silas. Now, it's possible there are many people named Silas, right? But it's also possible, could this person be the young man that was freed and ended up working with Richard? I don't know, to tell you the truth, but I have to ask that as a question, right? I don't know. And so this is the case. This is the first part of it. There's an amazing resource on the internet, cases adjudged in the Supreme Court of New Jersey relative to the manumission of Negroes and others held in bondage. And this is all the minutes from the Supreme Court hearings put together by the New Jersey Society for Promotion of Abolition of Slavery. So when I first looked at this, I had to look at the originals. There was nothing digitized. And now things are digitized, yay! And so I can show you, not the handwritten ones that I can barely read myself, but what's fascinating about this case is it's involving John Horsfield, Horseful, in Upper Freehold. And he's promised that the children of the enslaved woman he's freed will be freed as part of his will. But James Anderson, a doctor, he owned 120 acres in town, and he's a slave owner, says, no, this is my property. Now, sometimes what would happen in other cases, the Supreme Court would say, I want you to bring your property, your slave, to case. Oh, he was sick today. Oh, I couldn't bring her. She was ill. And so sometimes, in the case of the Barkalow family, the Supreme Court justices would ride their horses out to the farm. I mean, this is like crazy stuff going on in Upper Freehold. So he ordered, in this case, Kinney, ordered that Silas be brought by James Anderson to court. And then they issued the ruling in front of Silas and Anderson saying he's a free man. He's no longer your property. This is a writ of habeas corpus that's challenged as a freedom suit. And boom! So after that, I believe Silas is living with Richard because there are other documents in Pennsylvania, in the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, that say that Richard's harboring a slave that ran from a master. So it's just, I'm trying to piece it all together. I think this may be the same person. So I go back to the tax rolls, And Anderson owned a slave in 1789. Again, all years are not available. 1790 and 1792. Prior to 1789, another Anderson owned a slave. In 1792, he's finally listed as a doctor, Dr. Anderson, and then he owns no people after that. That's how we know that in this case Silas has been freed. There is no record of a young man of his age. And so James Pemberton, the president of the Abolition Society, Quaker, sends Richard a note that their sincere thanks should be conveyed to thee for the humane and spirited exertions in the cause of Negro Silas. I love this language. When men of acknowledged worth thus step forth in the cause of the oppressed Africans, it affords additional encouragement to our society by inspiring hopes that the endeavors to abolish domestic slavery will be crowned with success. Now, this is a very paternalistic language. And in many ways, when you look at the Quaker certificates of freedom, they'll often have the Abolition Society, an African American kneeling, practically naked, and the Quakers holding Isaiah to read the Bible to them. So there is a paternalism. I mean, many African Americans just self-emancipated, right? Because they're Quaker owners and others weren't going to free them. Like Colonel Ty in Middletown, there was a Quaker owner. Colonel Ty said, I'm out of here. Right? Titus became Colonel Ty. So, all right, let's go to the next one. I think I only have 3 more. So when Waln wrote to Elias Bonanon, he was concerned about Upper Freehold resident John Horsfield's will being violated. Again, this is Silas. Elias Bonanon, as you may or may not remember, was president of the Continental Congress, the head of the Mint, and Waln corresponded with him, said, I need your help. This is not going well. You need to contact the Attorney General Patterson. You need to talk to the Supreme Court about this. We need your help. The African American women were to be freed from slavery 15 years, had children. And the issue was that child free? Because the child was not born free while the children of the initial mother that gave birth were free. It's like all these bizarre caveats to keep someone enslaved, right? This is the slave owner's law at work. And you have this attempt of largely Quakers, some Methodists, some just angry white people saying this is wrong, starting with the mass abolition movement changes in the Quakers after 1775 and many missions. And we'll conclude with Richard Waln. This is a very polite group of people. They always write letters back and forth to each other. Thank God, because otherwise we wouldn't know half of this. So thanks to the Abolition Society for my conduct in the case of Negro Silas. And this is actually, he's trying to be humble here. I received thy letter on the 11th of the present month. This distinguished mark of their approval was more pleasing as I have met with some discouragements in that business. Yes, he did. Permit me to add that I am with lispments of personal esteem, thy respectful friend. So this is like the language of the period. I showed you that already. And then I just wanted to say thank you. I know we had a whirlwind. And just thank you for joining me on this Discovery Day. All right? All right. Now, I may keep this up if you have a question. I might try to go back to the slide. And if I can't do it, we'll just shut it down. Yes, who was called 1, 2, Shamil, and then Linda.
Well, can I go first? And
okay, yes. Linda Shamil.
Okay. As a Quaker,
yes.
Thank you for mentioning this and bringing up some of this history. Shamel and I worked, along with a third person,
yes.
on manumissions for Quakers living in Old Gloucester County.
Yes, yes.
And so I want to bring up 2 dates that I think are very relevant to this.
Good.
In 1758, there was a big gathering of Quakers in Burlington in that old and beautiful meeting house. And it was at that point when John Woolman and Anthony Benezet spoke very fervently and finally convinced people that to agree that slavery was wrong. This was after like 100 years of different things going on.
Thank you.
So 1758 was critical. And then, I can't remember the specific date, but I think it was 1775 or 76.
Yes.
when it was clear that people were saying, yes, slavery's wrong, but they're not doing anything about it.
Yes.
And so there was the requirement that Quakers are organized where we meet. Our meeting is monthly, but we get together with others for quarterly meeting, and then the big gathering is yearly. So the quarters were mandated by the yearly meeting, the big group, to create a record, as we saw in the Philadelphia piece, that each manumission would be recorded by the clerk of the quarter. And so you could see that gradually, yes, everyone was released from slavery. But in that, we also saw what you're showing here, that people would say, you'll be released within 10 years, 15 years. Children to be released at a certain point, girls and boys at different times. The other piece I'd like to do, and forgive me, I'm going to talk about violence. When Quakers were talking about why it was wrong to have slaves, of course there were the theological questions and the humanitarian questions. But at that point in time, as written up by Gerald Horn in his book, The Counter-Revolution of 1776, for more than 100 years there had been a lot of slave uprisings throughout the colonies, and there had been at least one slave uprising here in, I think, North Jersey, or East Jersey. And so there was a sense by Quakers that, yes, that slavery results in violence. Mm-hmm. There also was a recognition that there were children being born who were neither white nor African. They were mulatto, and it was the sense that this was probably a result of rape. And so there was a sense that Quakers are very big on violence and trying to stop wars. And so this was some extra piece that they brought to those concerns.
Oh, thank you so much, Linda. Before we go to Shamil, let me just add two things. I know Graham Russell Hodges wrote about the slave rebellion, and the year is just blanking out, but Graham Russell Hodges, and just Google, and that background will be there. I spoke at Anthony Benezet's tercentennial in Paris, at the University of Paris, and he and Woolman were like a tag team, but one of the things I think is beautiful is the African school for children in his home. So that is another example of somebody. Bye, everybody. Be well. That's another example of just commitment. I also love Benjamin Lay, who's a wild man, Quaker, and Benjamin Lay actually stood in the meeting and stabbed, and it's unclear if it's a stomach bladder, or a vessel of some sort, a pokeberry, saying this is what you were doing when you were slave owners. This is on you. And people screamed at that meeting. So there are so many traditions among Quakers. Slavery is terrorism. There's no doubt about it. Slavery is violence. And there were many ways to approach it, including doing nothing. And I know from Gloucester there were lots of Quakers who were visited by committees on suffering and told, you have to leave because she won't give up enslaved people. So even in the 1780s and 90s, I'm reading records in other manumission records in Gloucester County and Woodbury. So yeah, there's a great divide. Like there's a myth. Everybody's releasing Quaker slaves in South Jersey. Not true. It was a long struggle, like you said. I'm glad you mentioned violence. Thank you. All right, Shamil. Go, Shamil.
Oh, she was next, and then I'm going to go. Yes.
So Gilbert, how did he get his 60 acres of land?
I don't know who may have owned him at one point. I don't know if he saved enough money and bought it.
There's no deed?
There is no deed for anything I can see with his name on it. Now, somebody mentioned at a meeting that there was a Wooby deed. The only deed I've seen in records is for the Montgomery house. But that was not for property for Wooby, but there were Woobies, slaves that came in that at one point. And that's Eglinton, and that's an Upper Freehold. But no, I can't find a deed. And if anybody finds it, tell me. You'll be a footnote, and you will get credit. We'll put you in bold, so everybody who does anything gets credit. So I love that question. Did you have another one?
No, I'm good.
I want to thank you and Linda. Yes, I'm going to turn my back. I'm sorry. I just want to thank you and Linda for the outstanding work you've done on the 399.
Oh, yeah. She asked me what I was going to say. So where 339 is started by a Black Quaker woman to find out what happened to those who were manumitted by Quakers. So I'm on the team with a couple other genealogists, so you'll know more about that soon.
Well, thank you for all the work that you've done. All right, the back row. Let me twist my body here. Yes, who is
Thank
it?
you, Sue. We saw you at last week at the talking about James Ruby.
Oh, yes,
So
yes.
now my question is, James Ruby, he was the flag bearer
Yes.
at the 1776, and we learned about that. What was James Ruby to who you talking about today? Gilbert Ruby. How are they related?
I don't know the genealogy. I don't. I've actually my new project is just going through census records on Ancestry, and I don't know that genealogy. I know that there are Gilberts and Stacy Wooby relatives, but I don't think it's this particular person, but it might be children. So I don't have the genealogy yet. Somebody who wants to do an extraordinary project, the genealogy is necessary.
James would have been older than Gilbert.
No, Gilbert probably would have been older than James, because James was, we're looking at the Civil War period. This is the Revolutionary War period.
Okay.
So I started looking, again, free blacks are not always listed fully on census. There's a great census, I think, for 1830. And I started going through that for Upper Freehold. So I'm sorry to say, I don't have that information, and I can't make it up. Sorry, can't make it up.
You said we could have servants.
Yes.
Are the servants free or not?
That's the only one category. I think that was a way that he was saying, if I could jump in his head, he was embarrassed by owning slaves, even though he did. And so a servant could be someone apprenticed, could be a person who is to be freed and not yet freed. But again, I don't know that because it's the only time servant appears in the tax records. And Waln has a lot of money and resources, and so an exception was made for him. So, but it's one of those things where when I write this up, I just say, we need to be aware of this and this and this. That could be Peter Waln. It could be. Yes, yes.
And you were saying that the black owners had slaves as well. Were they? And you said they were getting their family members.
Yes, yes. Let me
So
turn
were
around
they
this way.
also trying to keep them safe?
Yes.
And protected.
Yes. The black. This is so important because inevitably, when I've spoken around the country, and even in my classrooms, I was teaching college history. People would say, "Well, black people own slaves." And I go, "Well, let's pull out Carter Woodson, shall we?" And so when we go back to Carter Woodson, he just looked at the fact that a lot of times when you could not be just freed, you had to be purchased by somebody. Then that person had to sign a certificate that says something like, this person will, I certify that this is a good, orderly person, will not commit crimes, will be a good part of the community. That's what he's doing. And so let's go back to Thomas Jefferson for a minute. My God, when he died, he sold all the people that he promised, his family did, all the people that they would never break up among his slaves. So these men had to go and then try to make money as free blacks who had been freed beforehand. Some freed later ran away to Ohio. And they had to raise money to try to figure out, where did my wife go? Where did my child go? That happens here too. And I need to say also, I don't want to harper on violence, the V word, but we've had blacks burned alive in Monmouth County as part of retaliation. We've had murders, Wench Betty's murder, brutal, beaten with a broomstick, just because she refused to go to the home, and that was the kitchen. So, when you talk about, slavery is good up here, wrong.
Yeah, wrong.
All right, it's like, there is no good slavery. All right, thank you. Yeah, I hope I answered it. Maybe I didn't. Okay, who's here? Anybody? I'm going to do my turning move here. I'm on the microphone. Well, I'm so happy that you're here. You have my email. Sadly, I won't be doing personal research for anybody. I barely can take care of myself. But send me your questions, because you know what? When anybody sends me a question, it tells me, oh God, I didn't think of that. I need to figure that out. And if you have a story, if you know something going, you send it to me, and I will credit you. You're amazing. I'll put you in. Everybody who knows something gets credit. All right? All right? Thank you. Thank you.